We are going to begin on our 10-minute painting of a large looming lightning storm in the background with a large square-headed brush from Artist Loft and a mixture of blue. The pigment itself is primary blue mixed with titanium white and black. Now we're adding the titanium white and the black, which of course mix to a gray, because we want to tone down the saturation and the vibrancy of our blue. If we were simply to apply a natural blue to the canvas, it might look bright and vibrant, and like a day's sky, it might invoke very happy feelings. However, this is a lightning storm, and to properly emote the feelings we intend to and create the mood and the atmosphere we intend to, we need to tone down the blue and all of our other colors, and gray is a great way to do that. I'm now taking that same color that I used in the sky and applying it to the bottom of my canvas where I'm going to want to incorporate a lake. It's important to remember that water is simply a reflection of all of the colors that surround it. So whatever the sky is, whatever the surrounding areas are, the water should adopt those exact colors as well. Moving on from there, while the canvas is still wet, I'm taking a medium-sized round-headed brush, a pure black, and I'm beginning to plot in a number of clouds. And I'm doing this predominantly by initially applying a fairly straight line. It's going to have bumps, it's going to have curves, as clouds do, but it's going to move in a general direction. And then I'm going to connect varying pieces. Now, none of these clouds are perfectly horizontal. They all move up on varying rotations and slants, and I'm keeping the bottom of each of these clouds fairly sharp, whereas the tops of them are blended upwards and feathered into the blue that the sky innately is. So the idea here is that the bottom of all of our clouds is going to be very dark. It is going to be almost a pure black. And as we move upwards into the tops of the clouds, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter and begins to become the blue that we initially applied. Now, if you're finding that you're not getting a soft blend from the black to the blue because your blue background already dried, you can simply add water to your mix and it's going to become much more viscous, and you're going to be able to render much softer feathered gradients from a full black pigment of a high opacity to something that's very see-through and very transparent. So going back to the clouds and why we're doing it in this manner, imagine clouds like something fairly transparent, right, as they are. However, at a certain point, they too become opaque. And there's this light that is above them. It is shining down and it is trying to shine through them. So it gets through the tops of the clouds, but it doesn't get through the bottom, more dense area because there's just so much cloud to get through. So that's really why the bottom of these clouds is going to be so dark, while the top is going to be brighter. The light was able to penetrate through a certain amount, and at a certain point it wasn't able to get anywhere, which is why we have such dark looming clouds, but we get those nice beautiful blues in there as well. I'm continuously going back and applying more black to the bottom, sharper portions of the clouds because, of course, the initial layers would blend with the blue and we wouldn't get that pure, stark color that we want. I'm also trying to continuously build up a gradient from dark to light, and I'm getting it fairly stark on the dark end of it because, again, this is a fairly moody painting. We're not incorporating very bright portions here either because, again, this isn't meant to be daylight. And that's important to remember, that you don't always have to use a pure black and a pure white. Sometimes paintings are going to require much more dark tones, and sometimes they're going to require much lighter tones. And that's really going to help affect the mood. We're now going to let that dry and come back in and add the highlights. So here, using that same brush, we're going in with some titanium white and primary blue, and I'm outlining the bottom of the dark portions of the clouds which is essentially the top of the bright portions of the clouds. I hope that makes sense. We're essentially going to the base of the darkest point of the cloud, and then right under that, we're applying light. And we're applying this in a number of places. We're not getting too bright anywhere, but we're going to pick varying areas where we want our lightning to be coming from. And we're going to pick one or two dominant areas. And these areas are going to be where our main lightning strikes are going to be emanating from. This is where this light is really going to be prevalent. And you only want to pick a couple because you don't want your painting to become too busy. And in a lightning storm, we're essentially choosing a lightning strike and ensuring that it is going to be our main subject, our main focal point. So with that in mind, you want it to really stand out. You don't want too much of it. So we're going to make one giant lightning bolt in the middle, or rather off to the side a little bit to follow along with the rule of thirds. But then we're going to do two other smaller lightning strikes that are just going to complement it. But they're not going to be as dark, they're not going to be as large, and they're not going to be as bright. And that way, the viewer's eye is led into the brightest portion of the painting, which is our main subject, which is our main lightning strike. Now, before we get into the lightning, I'm going to let all of that dry, and I'm going to go down and work on the trees at the bottom of our painting. Now, this is a mixture of primary yellow and primary blue, which render a green, and a good amount of black. You can almost not see the green. It's one of those things where it doesn't really show up on camera, but the hint of color is there because it's going to make it a lot more interesting in person. And I'm beginning by applying the paint predominantly in horizontal strokes, but then I'm blending it upwards sharply in vertical strokes to create this litany of trees. We create this very easy tree line like this with the square-headed brush. If you need to make your tree sharper, incorporate a little bit more water in your mixture and you'll get something much more viscous and sharp. I'm working this around our bottom lake here, and I'm just trying to ensure that we have a path in the water. That way the viewer looks at the water and they're led into the painting. They're led through these trees back into really the heart of it, right? So that's something to consider as well. It's always great to create pathways and adventurous areas in your painting so your viewer is not only drawn in through color and value, but also through the subject matter itself. I'm now adding reflections of trees at the bottom of all of our water and land masses in the same way that I applied the tops of them. And this is just going to add a little bit of additional detail to our piece. I'm now taking a small square-headed brush and applying a little piece of reflective water that's separating the land from the water itself. This is kind of the water hitting the shore and creating this really beautiful light. So now that we've separated our reflections from our land, I'm taking that same pigment and I'm applying just a plethora of horizontal strokes in the water to show that there is movement within it. And it's just going to add to the kind of looming nature of the painting. It's kind of neat. So with that being said, I'm now adding the lightning in the sky with, again, another square-headed brush because they have fairly sharp edges and are fantastic for detail work. I'm creating the lightning almost like an upside-down tree, and I'm trying to ensure that all of my strokes are very small. I want the top of my lightning bolt to be the brightest, and as we move down, it kind of dissipates and becomes more transparent. And that's easy to do as the paint will naturally run out itself. Again, to make this sharp, I would implore you to incorporate a good amount of water. I'm now adding a little bit of additional light up to the top of our lightning strike, and beginning to apply a second, less dominant one in the background. And this is just going to accentuate it and again add to the piece itself. I'm now going to add a little bit of additional pieces of light reflecting in the water just to kind of balance out the painting a little bit. And we're actually going to add one more lightning strike over on the right, moving in the opposite direction. And really, there we have it. That is our 10-minute painting. This was really fun. I truly hope you've enjoyed. If you're new to acrylics and you'd like to learn more, there is a link in the description to my ebook, Acrylic Painting for Beginners. And of course, I post every Saturday. I hope to see you next Saturday. Thank you so much for watching, and above all, stay creative.